In this video we want to talk about some theoretical perspectives that relate to employee relations. So we're going to look at some of the more theoretical backdrop to the discussions that go on in the context of employee relations. Employee relations is an important element in managing human resources. The concept identifies both employer and employee rights, power, legitimacy, and obligations from both parties. So clearly, when looking at managing human resources, we need to understand employee rights, the relative power positions, who's stronger, management or organised labour, let's say, the rights and wrongs of particular cases that are being argued, in other words, the legitimacy of the cases being put forward, and the obligations of both parties. The traditional view of industrial relations, please note here we're talking about industrial relations, we'll talk about the difference between employee relations and industrial relations later, but the traditional view of industrial relations focused on rules and procedures associated with employment. This created a reliance on trade unions. So there was, in terms of industrial relations, there was an understanding that negotiations had to take place between organised labour and the employers to try and find equitable or workable outcomes. It was felt if there was no union, then the power relationship would be predominantly in favour of management, and therefore workers would not have rights, or would not have rights respected, or workers' entitlements would be not so much. So it was in the interest of the workers to combine into trade unions to try and balance up the power relationship, so that the trade union, who would then argue for its members with the management, and it was done more one-to-one, it was done on more equal terms, and it was felt that that was better for industrial relations. Trade unions were seen as protecting the rights and interests of their members. This was achieved through collective bargaining to gain better pay and working conditions. Essentially, all the members of the trade union, all the workers who subscribed to the trade union, nominated or agreed with the union, speaking on their behalf. So it was looking at a relationship between the union, which was a single entity, and management, single entity, and negotiations on that part. But the union had the authority of its members to speak on their behalf. So that was the idea behind collective bargaining. Now, employee relations has become a common term for industrial relations. It just means there's more recognition that a lot of people are working in the service sector and not so much working in industry. Industrial relations has a connotation of heavy industry, perhaps engineering and assembly and manufacturing, but the structure of the economy is changing, and it's changing quite rapidly, changing towards services. So employee relations is felt to be a better term. The work environment has changed considerably over the years, resulting in non-industrial relations and emphasis on informal social relations. So the work environment has changed significantly. The relationship between management and employees has changed as well. There's now more statutory rights for the employee, and therefore, of course, less need for trade unions. And in fact, trade union membership in the UK has fallen dramatically over the last few decades. So there's a greater reliance on talking and understanding than perhaps confrontation. Employee relations places more significance on the role of the employer the employee, I should say, in the organisation. There's more understanding that the employee is important and that the employee should be looked after and accommodated rather than simply ordered to work in a certain way or according to a certain set of rules or certain times or whatever. There's more emphasis on motives and ideology and perspective and employee contract, team working, employee involvement in decision making. It's more collaborative. It's more inclusive than in the past. In the past, the employees were probably more seen as a resource of the business in the sense that they performed functions and they received an income for performing the functions, but that was about the extent of it. Now employees are consulted regarding changes, they're consulted about perhaps the design of the product, about marketing strategies, quality is important. Employees are involved much more and are seen much more as an important resource of the organisation, one that has to be looked after. Now the frames of reference in terms of employee relationship, well, there are three main theoretical perspectives on employee relations within the workplace. The three perspectives are unitarism, pluralist and radical. All three provide a very different understanding and analysis of workplace relationships. So we have three perspectives: unitarism, pluralist and radical. And we need to talk about these and see what's meant by them. And this will really constitute the rest of this particular talk. Each view offers different perceptions of workplace relations and identifies certain workplace behaviours. Certain events such as conflict will be dealt with according to the ideologies adopted by the organisation. So when there is conflict, the way it's dealt with will depend on the particular view or ideology that's adopted by the organisation. Is it unitarism or pluralist or radical? How does the organisation view the employee relationship schema within the organisation? So let's start with unitarism and see what's meant by it. This assumes that an organisation is a team working in complete harmony and in an integrated system. So it's the organisation is a team. Everybody's in it together. It's a team working in complete harmony. Management, employees, everyone pulling in the same direction. No conflict. It's an integrated system. Management and employees work together as one happy family and share the same interests of organisational goals, objectives and purpose. Everybody working together to try and achieve the objectives. They see the situation in the same way. Employees see it the same as management. They're all in it together. They're all working towards outcomes that they all agree upon. They're all in harmony. The assumption is that the organisation is a single entity, with management delegating to a loyal employee structure. It's one entity, and the management may lead it, but the employees agree and they go along with it, and everybody's working in the same direction. There's no conflict, there's no dispute, there's no argument. Everyone agrees. They're all moving in the same direction. With unitarism, there's no conflict in unitarism. Employees and management work together. Conflict is seen as unnecessary and avoided at all cost. Everyone agrees, they're all moving together, and they all see things in the same way. There's an understanding that management have the right to manage. This is seen as legitimate and rational. The management manage, but they manage in a way that everyone agrees. Everybody is happy to follow, and the management take the employees into account, and the employees understand what the management is trying to do. There is agreement. The workforce is seen as united and work together to achieve a common goal, profit and productivity. The workforce know that profit is important, otherwise the business would not exist. They know the importance of productivity. They're working towards the same goals, so there is no conflict. With unitarism, management make all the decisions and employees follow, as management are seen as right and trusted. The workforce see the management as doing the right thing. They're in agreement, so they follow. Employees follow instructions and work to the best of their ability, and they accept their position within the organisation. There is no need to have conflict or disagreement. They're all in agreement. Everybody, they understand management. They understand what management is trying to do. They trust the management, so they follow the management. Trade unions are seen as negative and external intrusions. They are seen as competing with management and redirecting employee loyalties. So the trade unions are not seen as necessary. The workforce are so compliant, so obedient, and so linked to management. They understand the management. There's a deep understanding between the workforce and the management. There's no conflict. So there's no need for a trade union under this particular perspective. Many managers encourage unitarism within the organisation. It legitimizes management power and authority. Management power is understood by the employees. The managers must manage, they must make decisions, they must control the organisation, and the workforce agree with this and go along with it. It gives managers the right to rule and control their employees, while employees adhere to what they have been told. They're very obedient, compliant. The employees don't want to upset the management. They follow the management. They agree with the management. Employees work to satisfy the needs of their managers. The managers set out what is required, and the workforce try to achieve it. Now, with pluralism, this view differs from unitarism. The assumptions and values assume that workplace conflict is inevitable. This means that it sees the fact that there are workers and management. That's a recipe for conflict. There are different power situations, different power relationships that don't go along with what management see. The perception is that organizations are complex social systems comprising of different interest groups. The workers are an interest group. They want their salaries improved, their wages improved. They want their working conditions improved. They want more holidays. They want better working conditions, so on and so on. Management, on the other hand, want their directives followed and adhered to. They want more productivity. They want more profits. So there are different perspectives within the organization. There are different groupings that want different things, and that inevitably leads to conflict. The organization consists of powerful and divergent subgroups: management, employees, and maybe subgroups within that. Different employees want different things. Maybe the employees in the offices want something and the employees on the shop floor want something else. The subgroups, well, it's composed of individuals, each having their own interests, objectives, and leadership. There will be powerful personalities on the shop floor, powerful personalities in the offices, powerful personalities amongst the management. The whole situation is a recipe for conflict. Conflict is inevitable in this approach. This is due to differing opinions and interests of different groups. And the different groups are, as I've just said. Trade unions are seen as representatives of employees and deal with conflict and dispute through collective bargaining. So the employees form themselves into a collective entity, into the trade union. They subscribe to a trade union who appoint members to look after the interest of the employees, and these members will negotiate with the management. But it is negotiations, it's competitive, and it's dealing with situations that are likely to lead to conflict. Employers accept trade unions as part of the labour scene and work with management and employees to limit and resolve disputes. The employers sometimes have to work with the trade unions. They're trying to resolve disputes or the potential for disputes. So the employers work with the trade unions represent the employees. It's trying to provide a working climate which enables the organisation to move from one time period to the next. It enables the organisation to survive. It tries to resolve conflict. But the very nature of the organisation means that there are subgroups who have different requirements and different aspirations. The approach requires organisations to invest in employee relations and personnel specialists who advise managers regarding staffing, issues regarding union consultation and negotiation. So the fact that there is conflict or the potential for conflict because of the different groups means that some resources have to be dedicated to try and find mechanisms or personnel who will ameliorate the problems, who will reduce the problems, find common ground and enable the organisation to continue. But it means resources have to be dedicated to do this. The trade unions and representatives should be encouraged in this approach in order to maintain cooperation from employees. So if the management do employ specialists or specialist people within their HR sections to deal with negotiations, the trade unions must recognise the role, must recognise those people as having that role and negotiate with them. There must be cooperation, there must be agreement between the two sides as to how to proceed. The radical view, well, in the radical view, conflict is seen as unavoidable and necessary in this radical perspective. It's necessary for change. So this view sees conflict as inevitable. And actually it's necessary. That's the way it sees it. It sees conflict as necessary because it's through conflict that we get change. And that's the particular perspective of this radical view. The radical perspective is based on economic power and society. Class conflict is necessary in order to change differences in economic power between employers and employees. So it's looking at the organisation in terms of class, the working class, the employees, and the managerial class, perhaps the middle class, who are therefore in conflict. This view, which I suppose we could trace back to philosophers back in the 1800s, most notably German philosophers, but also to the works of Karl Marx. The idea is that through conflict, the situation that exists in an organisation will be a situation of conflict, and through the conflict a new organisation, a new set of rules, a new way of working will emerge, and that new way of working should be better than the old one. Therefore it's a good thing to have conflict. Therefore conflict should be encouraged, because out of the conflict a better world will emerge. Now, I'm not doing justice obviously to Karl Marx or to any of the great thinkers in the past, but it's based on the idea of a given situation generating its opposite. And when the opposite and the original situation come into contact, there's conflict, out of which a solution will be found, and that solution will eventually become the orthodoxy that will generate a new alternative which will cause more conflict. So this situation is perpetual revolution, perpetual warfare between management and labour. The two sides are so different that conflict is inevitable. But out of the conflict, after every conflict has been resolved, it'll be a new situation. It's believed that the new situation will be better than the previous one, more enlightened, better conditions and so on. But it'll all start again, and there'll be more conflict in the future, more disputes and new solutions, and the new one that arises will be better again. All of this must be seen within the context, of course, of the practicalities in which business operates. With globalization and changes in technology, the luxury of trying to have permanent conflict to bring about improvements may not be on the table, because the market will be taken by cheap imports from abroad, for example. But as a perspective, this is offered. This is the third perspective. The source of conflict is necessary to protect employees from powerful, profit-hungry organisations who have no regard for employees and their rights. So this view takes a very dim view of management. To see management as having no regards for the employees. They don't care about the employees. They're just interested in profits and in pursuing profits. So therefore, the only way to deal with them is to have conflict and to oppose them. The basic principle of conflict arises between capital owners and those who supply labour. So there's on the one side the capitalists, the people who own the capital. On the other side there's labour, and that's where the conflict arises. The source of conflict is between societies, social and political institutions favouring capitalism, and the working class having unequal access to education, economic, political and social institutions. So this view sees labour as almost disenfranchised. They're cut off from educational facilities, from economic opportunities, cut off from the political decision making and the social institutions. So it's inevitable that labour will have to fight, and the fight in the workplace, the fight management, they have disputes, and it's the very nature of the organisation. That's what the view states. The view states that conflict is inherent in the situation. It's inevitable. The management's aim is profit and control over the workforce, which enables the organisation to achieve their aims. So on the one hand, management just concentrates on profits, according to this view, concentrates on profits and the continuation of the business. It doesn't concern itself with the welfare of the workers or opportunities for the workers or consultation with the workers. The workers, on the other hand, want to organise themselves into a union that will take on the management, will fight with the management, will have disputes, will achieve successes in certain areas which will be better for them than before the dispute. So the ingredients for the dispute is ever present. Conflict arises from differences in society and is seen as natural to the capitalist system, which is reflected in the organisation. So the organisation is like a microcosm of society. It's like society written small. The organisation, the company, has all the ingredients. It's like the capitalist system. In the company, some people own the capital, other people work with the capital, and there is a conflict between the two. The management want more profits and the continuation of the business. The workers want better working conditions, more pay, holidays, and so on. So there is inevitably a source of conflict. Trade unions are vital in the radical view. They are seen as part of the class struggle, the struggle of the working class, labour in this case, to try and get more from the capitalist class, the people who own the capital. So instead of them making more profits, perhaps some could be paid out in higher wages to the working class, or better terms of employment, or better working conditions. So that's where the struggle is. And this is very much based on the work of, as I said earlier, of Karl Marx, whom I don't want to discuss in this context because it's very big, very complicated, very elaborate, and really deserves its own treatment in other videos. So I'm not getting involved in it here. Finally, trade unions must associate with political parties to achieve the desired change within society. So the trade unions don't just work within organisations, they affiliate themselves to political parties to bring about wider societal changes. So we have three views of employee relations. We have the unitarism, which is everybody's in it together, everybody sees the situation in the same way. There is the pluralist and the radical, which we've just looked at. It's important to understand the basis upon which the three perspectives rest and understand their differences. So it's worth, again, going over it and doing some extra reading in this area, because this is what underpins employee relations. There are just the three views that we need to be familiar with. There's quite an extensive reading on it. You'll find a lot of it if you just go onto the web and just type employee relations perspectives, and quite a lot of material will come up. But that's all we're going to deal with in this talk, so let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.